Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant and welcome to Exploring Elite Dangerous episode 35. After many months of working my way to Sagittarius A, I have now passed right through there and am working my way toward the opposite side of the galactic core. I am now approaching 30,000 light years from Earth and have made a fair few interesting discoveries along the way. A few hundred light years out from Sagittarius A, I come across this beautiful icy rock planet. And after this, I travelled for around about 1,000 light years without coming across anything of particular interest, until I discovered this nebula. Now, as with many things near the galactic core, it is all chock full of stars. There are thousands of stars here, and this is one of the first nebula I've come across in a very long time, where it is more or less entirely undiscovered. I haven't found one system out here yet that has been explored by another player, meaning that I am the first discoverer of all the systems I've so far entered out here. This happens to be a very large nebula, and on the outer edge of it, it blends rather nicely with the colours from the galactic core, and as you move deeper into the nebula, it transitions into blacks, blues and reds. But the backdrop wasn't the only thing of interest out here. I also came across some brilliant planets. This gas giant had an ice planet orbiting very close to it. This is a sort of location I would earmark to come back to when I can land. There no doubt be great pleasure in driving to the top of a mountain range and looking up and seeing a gas giant like that hanging in the sky. There was also a rather nice ice asteroid field hanging around this particular gas giant, and although the fog here was a little bit thick, which prevented me from being able to see the nebula that I was hoping to take a look at from within these rings, it was still a nice diversion nonetheless. Now, a nebula like this one is one of the very interesting ones because it is split into a number of colours, so as you move around the nebula, the backdrop changes dramatically. Added to that, the galactic core surrounds this entire area, so in a few locations it blends rather spectacularly with the nebula itself. Here then is a pair of twin planets. I've heard tell of planets orbiting this close to each other and seen a few YouTube videos to boot, but this was the first time I'd discovered such a place myself. And although this is the second time I've mentioned it already in this particular video, I can't help but wonder what it would be like to be on the surface of one of those planets and looking up to see the other one orbiting so closely. Although I didn't capture any video footage of this, I did sit very near these two planetary bodies in space and watched them orbit around each other. Now, they have a fairly fast orbit cycle, and I sat there for about 10 minutes and they did around about a 90-degree orbit around each other. Now again, that's something I'd love to see from the planetary surface. On Earth, obviously, we have a 24-hour rotation cycle, so our sun goes up and goes down within that same time period, and the moon, of course, has its own slow and inexorable orbit around us. Now, just imagine what it's like on these two planets, where you're down out on the surface and you see one of these planets come up on the horizon. It's very close, so it's massive. It comes up over the horizon and rapidly transitions over the sky, and then sets on the opposite horizon, all within a period of 15 to 20 minutes. That's going to be something you'll see almost flying across the sky, something we've never seen on Earth. Space is vast, and in a procedurally generated galaxy like we have in this game, there's almost limitless possibilities of all the combinations of things that we're going to be able to see. So as I moved on through this nebula, the background colours just kept on changing, different configurations, different patterns, all configured with multiple thousands of stars there. Just a sight I haven't seen in any other nebula aside from the planetary ones that I featured a few episodes back, but even they didn't have the vast number of colours here that we're seeing. Now, I always make a point of stopping by each different planet type. On the system map, ice planets don't look all that interesting, they look fairly dull, but I've found that if you get up close to them in the actual game, they do look pretty striking. And largely that's because of what from orbit looks like loads of scarring down on these planets, and that's obviously where the ice has probably fractured and moved around, forming massive canyons. Some of these have the potential to be many miles deep and thousands of miles long. Then, of course, we have planets like this one. This is a metal content planet, and of course it does have an atmosphere, but there are planets that look just the same and without an atmosphere, and what was interesting on there is that there were massive impact craters. As with canyons, we're no doubt going to be able to find craters that are miles deep and hundreds of miles across. impact craters from massive asteroids that, had they hit Earth, would cause a mass level extinction event. Impacts that hit hard enough to shatter continents and tectonic plates. Now, for those of you that haven't visited any nebulas like this, I wanted to show you what it's like when travelling across the star systems within one of these nebula. And I've seamlessly recorded a scene here that goes from the orbit of a planet, which was the grey metallic content one we were just around, and I've travelled across the system in supercruise, travelling at many times at the speed of light now. It really is a case that each direction you look in, the place looks dramatically different. Maybe one day this will be a place for human civilization, maybe one day it will be a place we come across alien civilizations and can have full-scale battles out here. Maybe we can one day have space stations out in places like this. It's something I keep saying, and I really hope that Frontier are listening. These areas are just too beautiful to be left empty as they currently are. If you're near the galactic core and you're near this region, it's a place that you might want to visit. The name of the nebula, and I'll probably make up my own pronunciation here, is Phi Poe, and I'll show you that on the galactic map at the end of this video. So far I'm still undecided on my course for where I'm going to go next. Obviously I've headed straight out the opposite side from Sagittarius A toward the opposite side of the galaxy at the moment, and I'm certainly going to keep heading in that direction till I reach the edge of the galactic core, at which point I'm going to need to make a decision at what direction I then want to head in. I'm going to keep going straight across to the outer edge of the galactic rim on the opposite side of the galaxy to Earth, or am I then going to turn toward the east or the west? Relatively speaking, in relation to my current heading and orientation, of course. All of those directions seem to have an appeal to them. The downside of going straight across to the outer edge of the galaxy is that it's going to take a lot longer to get back, and I do want to get back before the content for Horizons is released. So that really leaves me with choosing perhaps going around, navigating around the edge of the core until I come back towards Earth. Taking a look at the galactic map, there's a lot of very nice and interesting places located around the edges of the core. But in particular, there's a whole multitude of nebula around there, all the different styles, all the different colours. So it could well be worth doing that, and it gives me some different places to navigate towards. Once I do get back, I will load up with whatever modules are needed for planetary landing, and of course pick up an SRV and then head back out again. If you're in this area of space and you fancy visiting this nebula, here it is. I'll put the name of this nebula in the video description, and I'll pop an annotation on the top of the video as well. It's on the opposite side of the core to Sagittarius A, so it's quite a distance to get to it. But if you've passed through that black hole region, you might be looking for an area of interest that's a bit more colourful than the galactic core, and that's an ideal spot, quite nearby. So, after a fairly extensive excursion into that nebula, I decided it was time to move on. Looking back as I left the nebula was a fairly interesting sight to see it hang there against the backdrop of the galaxy. Now my aim is to keep pressing on in order to get out of this extremely dense area of stars, which once out will make navigation that much easier. I've located a few spots of interest that I'm going to aim toward. These are on the outer rim of the galactic core, and that is where I'm heading next. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time. We're sitting here 65 light seconds away from it, so you can tell that this is by far the largest black hole anywhere in the galaxy. In fact, it's so large that in order to see the active gravitational lensing effect, all you have to do is move the camera very slightly.